Hi everybody, it's Hillary the librarian again. Come to talk to you more about your sources for your astronomy papers. Thank you to all of you who completed the activity for me, and especially for your responses on the part where I asked you to tell me whether sources were primary or secondary and whether you could use them. Some of you gave some really thoughtful responses to this, and I really appreciate it. And it's also extremely informative. I learned some things about how I'm phrasing things that I'm going to do differently from here on out, thanks to your answers. So let's go over all of these. So we're on number 8 here. So this was the Carolina Herschel article about the comet, right? Transactions, an account of a new comet. So most of you got correct. So the blue here is that it's a primary source and it's a viable one for the paper, right? Because what's the criteria for primary sources for this paper, right? It has to be by an astronomer about their own observations. And that is exactly what this is. This is a letter that she submitted, or that somebody submitted on her behalf, I think, to the Philosophical Society here, or whatever they call themselves. What are they? Where are they? Philosophical Transactions, right? This is a letter about her own observations of this new comet. Oh, and here's a reminder from the library to make sure to wear your masks. Make sure to wear your masks when you're in the library. Anyway, so most of you got correct that this is a primary source and that it fits Dave's criteria and that you can use it in your papers. But some of you gave really good reasons why you wouldn't use it. And one of those reasons that came up a lot is this doesn't have anything to do with my paper topic. Well, yeah, right? If it doesn't have anything to do with your paper topic, you wouldn't want to use it. So this is on me for how I phrase the question, right? Next time I will phrase it regardless of your paper topic, or assuming your paper topic corresponds with this, would this work, right? If it isn't viable, if it isn't related to your paper topic, yeah, absolutely, you wouldn't use it. Another interesting comment I saw, somebody said, I don't really understand this, so I wouldn't want to use this. That's fair, right? I was encouraging you to choose accessible, easy stuff. The difficulty is sometimes you don't find stuff that's much more accessible than this, right? This is kind of short and sweet. As far as scientists writing about their own writing, this is actually not that bad. So what would you do if you couldn't find anything that was easier than this? Well, one thing you could do is look up words you didn't understand, right? Just Google them, see if you could figure it out. Talk to somebody who, one of your friends who is in physics, right? Who understands this stuff. You could also ask Dave for some help. He's not going to do your work for you, right? But if there's something specific where you're trying to figure out what the person is saying, I'm sure he'd be happy to go over that with you. Okay? So thanks for your responses on this one. So let's move out of this and back to this. All right, so the next one. So this was interesting. This was the NASA article, right? This is the NASA article on Juno. And there's some really interesting justifications here. So most of you say, oops, that's not the one. Most of you say that this is a secondary source and it is viable for your paper. Some of you said that it was a primary source and whether or not it was viable. So this is really interesting, right? This is why there's no primary source filter in one search, right? Because under the right circumstances, anything could be a primary source, right? People who said it was a primary source were like, well, it's written by NASA, so it's written by astronomers, so, and it's about astronomy, so it's a primary source. Not exactly, right? So if you look at it, it's an overview. It's a summary of science, right? But also there's something really important missing here. There's no author. So regardless of if it's a primary source or a secondary source, you need an author who's an actual person, right? NASA as a corporate author doesn't quite cut it here. And I realized, again, I'm going to rephrase this in the guide here. Look, if for secondary source expectations, have a clear author. You could have thought, oh, well, NASA's a clear author. You actually need a person. So I'm going to clarify that. So NASA is not, doesn't quite cut it here. Also, for those of you who said it was a secondary source, you need citations, right? Have a citations or a bibliography citing primary sources. There's no citations here. There's none. No citations. nothing cited, right? This is an overview. This is an overview. Something else that I think might confuse people, or might have confused people, I think did confuse people, is the assumption that because it's written by NASA, right, because it's NASA's name, it's written by an astronomer. So that's not actually the way it works. So somebody like NASA, an organization like NASA, communicating to the public about astronomy is a very important thing that they do, right? Because they want the rest of us who are not astronomers to understand what they're doing and be curious and interested and excited about it. So they hire people to write about this stuff who are not the people doing the observations, right? Some of these people definitely have a background in astronomy, right? But they are not the astronomers who are doing the observations. This is not a primary source where it's an author like that would be viable if you could consider it a primary source, and I don't really. But if you did, you would actually need an author writing about their observations. And that's not an author, an astronomer, I mean, writing about their observations. And that's not what you get here. This is very general. This is an overview. It even says overview, right? So that one I realize is pretty confusing and tricky. One of the key takeaways, one of the things that I saw coming up in the responses was a lot of people were like, it's reputable, it's NASA, boom, I'm golden. Now, you can't use stuff that's not reputable in your papers, but just because it's reputable doesn't mean you can use it. Please don't stop there. Please go back to these criteria for both primary and secondary. Go back. Don't just stop at from a reliable source. Is there a clear author who's a person? Does it have citations or bibliography citing primary sources? If not, it's not going to work for you, right? You could use information from this to inform your searches, right? But it's not a source that you can cite in your paper. I hope that distinction makes sense. If it doesn't, please reach out to me, right? You can contact me, ask a librarian here, right? And just shoot me an email and ask if you're unclear. Or if when you're actually working on this, if you've got sources and you're like, I don't know if these are going to work. Is this primary? Is this secondary? Is this, is it viable? Email me. I'm really happy to help with this. Okay, so let's move on to the final one. This was the one from HathiTrust. So this is this guy. This is the history and work of Harvard Observatory. So this was very interesting because this is written by an astronomer. And so many of you thought it's written by an astronomer. It looks old. Primary source. Not quite. It's a history. It's a history. So this is an astronomer who worked at the Harvard Observatory who's collecting the data of a bunch of other people and writing and summarizing it, right? Which makes it a secondary source, right? That makes it a secondary source. And it is a secondary source that's viable for your papers, right? Because I'm not going to scroll around in this because HathiTrust gets goofy and I'll move someplace I don't want to. But there are citations. There are citations of primary sources, right? The primary source is this data, right? This data that they've collected, right? And the writings of the other astronomers. So some of you noticed that. Thank you very much. Very good. So as far as what you guys thought, a lot of you thought it was primary. That's okay. Some of you thought it was primary and viable, and then there were some people who said it wasn't viable. Again, paper topic came up a lot. Thanks for pointing that out. I'll phrase it differently next time. One thing, and this is not to single out the individual who said this because this is a really common misunderstanding. Somebody said the website is .org, so it's reputable. Now, this is a very common misconception. I think students hear this in high school. People tell them in high school that .org means you can trust it. I want to disabuse you of that notion, okay? Because what all .org means is that it's written by an organization. There are reputable and less reputable organizations out there. And just because it's from an organization doesn't mean you can trust it, right? White supremacists have .orgs, right? All sorts of groups with all sorts of agendas that have nothing to do with what you want to be using have .orgs, right? Now, .gov is different, right? Because that's from the federal government. That's science from the federal government. So that's different. But .org does not mean it's trustworthy. Now, HathiTrust.org happens to be pretty good, right? So this, if you're not familiar with this, so it's spelled Hathi, but it's pronounced Hati. Let me actually see if I can adjust this so that you guys can see the address. No, that's okay. So it's HATHI. And HathiTrust.org is a place where a lot of libraries have uploaded stuff that's in the public domain, old published works that you can look at. And it can actually be a pretty cool place to search for primary sources. It's a little hit and miss, right? And good secondary sources too, right? This is an old thing that's in HathiTrust that's a secondary source, but just another tool you can use. So let me see if there's anything else that I need to tell you guys about. Whoopsie, got to see my family. That's exciting. What else? I think that's about all I wanted to say. Thanks for your thoughtful answers. And again, reach out to me. And I'm just going to bring this up right here to just remind you, my email is here, right? Hillary Wong, hillary.wong, cortland.edu. You can chat with me through Teams, right? Because we're all on Teams. I am too. And if you want to use the chat function on Ask a Librarian, I happen to be on from 5 to 9 p.m. I don't think that's on here. I'm going to edit this and get this on. This semester, I'm on from 5 to 9 p.m. on Sundays. So if you want to talk directly to me and actually catch me, you can do that then. Okay, thank you guys for your thoughtful work, and have fun working on your papers, and please reach out to me with your questions. All right, bye-bye.